But in order to avoid extreme confusion instead of just minor confusion, I'm going to ask for some appearances of those who have not appeared before, and if you could say your name clearly and who you're representing, I'd be most grateful. So, into the microphone, please. Thank you.
Andrew Barker, appearing with Honor Lanham for Dilworth School and the Dilworth Trust Board.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Dilworth Trust Board.
Carl Van Plas and Jaden Gosha for the Dilworth Class Action.
Thank you. And that's, oh. Just speak into the microphone, please, so that we can hear you.
Thank you. Fiona Guy Kidd, Jeremy Johnson and India Shores for the Anglican Church.
Thank you. Good, thank you. That gets us all back into line again. So, thank you, Ms Anderson.
Madam Chair, the order is the opening address from the Dilworth Class Action Group to begin, followed by Mr Barker's opening address in relation to the Dilworth Trust Board and School, and then we'll move on to the evidence of Dr Murray Wilton, who's here in the witness box with his support people.
All right. So I just say thank you, Mr Wilton, for coming in early. You're going to have to sit through the opening addresses. I hope that's all right for you. Comfortable doing that? Good, thank you. Very well. So, Mr Van der Plas, I think it's for you to open. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr Harding. Welcome back.
Thank you. Ko te whare e tu nei tēnā kau. Mihi atu ki te mana whenua o te rauhi nei Ngāti Whātua ora ki tēnā koutou. Ko te hanga mate, ki te hanga mate, haere, haere, haere. E te hanga ora kora, tai my name. Ko Carl Van Plas toku ingoa. Ko te horo ki te rohe. Ki puki moi moi ki te maunga, ki otaki ki te awa. Esteemed members of the Commission, Madam Chair, my name is Carl Van Plas and I appear alongside with Mr Neil Harding, one of our clients, on behalf of the Dilworth Class Action Group. And this is the first opportunity that you've heard from us during this Commission of Inquiry. I'm a Pakeha male in my late 20s with blonde brown hair. I'm wearing a black suit and turquoise tie. I acknowledge the house in which we stand. I acknowledge those who hold mana whenua. I acknowledge those who have passed and those who are present and living. I wish at the outset to also acknowledge the many courageous survivors who have engaged during this Commission of Inquiry and continue to engage with this Commission. In particular, I specifically want to acknowledge those who we have the privilege of representing, Mr Harding, who's beside me, and Mr HS, who isn't present today. And along with the full class of Dilworth survivors that they both represent. Mr HS has automatic name suppression, and because of that we refer to him as HS and only by those letters. In addition to appearing with me, Mr Harding will separately address this Commission later during the hearing to present a survivor-led initiative and petition. Mr Harding and HS both jointly brought the Dilworth Class Action. Both are survivors of sexual abuse at Dilworth, and both have courageously put themselves forward in the interests of survivors for the benefit of survivors. They are supported by a team of professionals, all of whom have given up their time to act pro bono in their assistance. Our team has been brought together and is supported by LPF Group, a well-known and renowned New Zealand litigation funder, Rachel Reid, an experienced King's Counsel who won't need any introduction to this Commission, leads our team. Ali Van Amas, is an experienced barrister and is also instructed as counsel. The solicitors for the class action are Wilson Howe, and our team is made up of Ian Denton, Andrew McCombie, Jaden Gosha, a law clerk who is seated behind me, and myself. Finally, Bronwyn Howes, a communications expert with Joyce Howes Consulting, has led Survivor and Public Communications. The Dilworth Class Action Group was established in early 2021 in response to Dilworth's failure to adequately apologise to and redress survivors of sexual abuse at the school. Our clients commenced the class action by filing a detailed complaint with the Human Rights Commission on 24 June 2021. This alleged that the widespread institutional sexual harassment of vulnerable students breached the Human Rights Act 1993. The complaint seeks to hold Dilworth accountable for knowingly failing to protect all survivors in its care between the 1950s and as recently as the last 15 years. Since filing, over 130 survivors and numerous witnesses have registered with the class action. However, the total number of Dilworth survivors far exceeds this, and the class action has been brought for all of their benefit. For Mr. Harding, the class action was born out of his realisation that many boys had been abused before he was, and had any one of their complaints been acted on by Dilworth, his abuse simply would not have happened. For HS, it was the shock of the scale of the abuse uncovered and his desire to ensure that what happened to him never happened to anyone else again. But for both of them, it was the disconnect between Dilworth's inadequate redress response and the scale of the abuse and the suppression of it that galvanised their resolve. The complaint sought that Dilworth establish an independent inquiry and an independent program to provide comprehensive redress. At the point of filing the complaint, Dilworth had not apologised for its role in the abuse or its suppression of it, and it had not offered or even publicly expressed a desire to explore redress or commission an independent inquiry. Now, a year later, we have gathered for this important hearing to consider both Dilworth and the Anglican Church's institutional response. We understand that the Commission is particularly interested in exploring, amongst other things, how these institutions responded to abuse at the time and how they have since responded, and in particular looking at Dilworth's independent inquiry, redress program and listing service. In considering these issues, we ask the Commission to consider the following kaupapa. He waka iki noa. He waka iki noa. This whakatauki translates at its simplest to we are all in this boat together. It is underpinned by the principles of partnership, working together, shared values, recognition and mutual respect. These principles are at the core of a best practice approach to complaints of abuse and redress, and we say are therefore at the core of the Commission's consideration of the institutional response. Like many institutions that harboured abuse, the power imbalance between Dilworth, the Anglican Church and survivors was immense. Dilworth is a private boarding school that was established to provide education and care for vulnerable and disadvantaged boys. It was entrusted with their guardianship and their pastoral care. Instead, from at least the 1960s, a culture of violence, fear and silence developed in the school in which this abuse occurred. Despite many brave boys complaining, Dilworth suppressed knowledge of the abuse, quietly moved on perpetrators, did not investigate, alert parents or authorities, and sought name suppression when offenders were brought before the courts. Regrettably, this power imbalance is still present today. Dilworth is a prominent and a wealthy school. Its net assets as of last year exceeded $1 billion, and it made a surplus exceeding $50 million. It is anticipated that the school may suggest that its redress program is world-leading. This is simply not accepted. While it has taken some positive steps, the school initially resisted establishing an inquiry, and the redress program that has now been commenced is neither comprehensive nor best practice. The Commission may wish to consider in particular the school's approach to including student-on-student abuse within the terms of the inquiry and the redress program, imposing a financial cap on redress payments, and to provide redress before the inquiry is complete. While changes were made by Dilworth following consultation with survivors, including the Dilworth Class Action Group, the manner and the process in which these changes occurred was akin to a commercial negotiation. And not all of those changes were made. Survivors feel that Dilworth's approach was to limit its own financial exposure, and they consider that this process caused them further trauma.
Just ask, when you say not all changes were made, do you mean not all changes suggested by the group, by your action group?
By the group, that's correct,
Yes,
Mark.
thank you.
And that's specifically to the redress program.
Right.
The process by which appropriate redress, including a full apology for all actions, is reached is just as important as the end result. To be truly best practice, the institution needs to work with survivors in a partnership in good faith, rather than paddling in a different direction that might better serve its own interests. As the Commission hears from the witnesses for Dilworth and the Anglican Church, we ask that it keep in mind and consider 5 factors. First, the Commission is only hearing from witnesses from these institutions, not the survivors who have engaged with these entities on redress. The evidence to be heard will therefore be an incomplete picture. Second, Dame Sylvia Cartwright and Frances Joychild KC are comprehensively considering the abuse and Dilworth's response both then and now as part of their independent inquiry. The Commission should be cognisant of this inquiry and the fuller detail it is receiving when considering this evidence it hears over the next couple of days and when making its findings. Third, we ask that the Commission consider how many vulnerable boys could have been spared and how many decades of abuse could have been prevented had Dilworth acted appropriately on numerous occasions. Fourth, when considering whether Dilworth's current redress response is truly comprehensive and truly best practice, we ask that it be assessed against present-day standards and expectations, rather than by comparison to past attempts by other institutions. Fifth and finally, we ask that the Commission in particular consider whether Dilworth's approach to engaging with survivors on redress was itself truly survivor-focused and best practice. Survivors have joined together in the same waka, he waka, eke noa. But has Dilworth and has the Anglican Church? Commissioners, Madam Chair, may it please the Commission.
Thank you very much.